I know you're very familiar with the ongoing broadband stimulus program
Yes.
that NTIA and RUS are carrying out, and of course they have focused on bringing middle mile
Right.
connectivity to
Right.
community centers
Mhm.
throughout the United States, but yet
Mhm.
they have a limited reach, and their
Right.
funding is going to, at least for projects, is going to be ending in September.
Right.
Can and will the National Broadband Plan leave off where those efforts have stopped and continue some of those goals, do you think?
Yes, I think it's all part of the same, solving the same puzzle. They had immediate funds that were designed to do a couple of certain things. One was create jobs, another is unserved and underserved. Our mandate from Congress was different. Plus our funding is different. To the extent that the FCC controls funding, it's largely in the USF fund. That's not it has not been middle mile, though I think one of the things we learned in the process, that even some of the big carriers say, we need to spend more money on middle mile deployment, particularly in rural America, because it doesn't support itself in a private sector model. So there ought to be some support for that to lower the cost. And it's absolutely true that when you look at it, and there's a lot of statistics in the plan on this, I can't remember quite, I think it's slightly over 50% of the unserved communities, they just need a capital expenditure subsidy. But for a lot of areas, you need both CapEx and ongoing OpEx because of the cost of middle mile connectivity.
And goal number 4 is to bring a gigabit to community centers, including schools.
Right.
And of course, that immediately kind of gets us into Universal Service Fund and E-rate. And I guess, again, that's a mechanism that maybe we can use to continue broadband's outreach to
Absolutely.
education.
Absolutely. One of the more interesting statistics to me, and I was here at the commission when the E-rate program was created, and all of us who worked on that feel very proud of it, because it is one area where the United States leads the world in terms of the percentage of classrooms connected. But over 50% of the teachers, I think just over 50% of teachers, say that the level of connectivity is not sufficient to do the kind of educational programs that they want. There's also some very interesting data about how online training in combination with live teachers produces the same result in half the time. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I haven't been in a classroom in a long time, but there were some classes I can recall very distinctly where I could move a lot faster than some of my classmates. There were some other classes, particularly language, for example, which I was not skilled, where I really needed more. And so the notion of having a teacher as a facilitator, but a bunch of kids sitting there, and whether they're learning math or Spanish, they're moving at their speed. They're getting reinforced to do what they want to do. By the way, the technology is already there. It's getting the technology used.
Right.
And you could see fantastic improvements in results on all kinds of things, but we've got to get better connectivity to our schools.
Yeah, which of course is brought out in some of your national purposes,
Right,
which are
right.
well done. And another one of the recommendations relates to the military.
Yes.
The Department of Defense, in which you say certain centers you believe ultra high broadband would be appropriate. What's behind that recommendation?
Well, the way we think about it was that we really want to reach this goal of 100 squared. We're not going to mandate that Verizon spend the money to do that, or AT&T spend the money to do that, right? That wouldn't be appropriate.
Right.
But we would like to create market-driven mechanisms to continually upgrade networks. So what do? We put in here some things about spectrum with the thought that if people use spectrum better, there'll be more pressure on low-end DSL from spectrum-based solutions, which may be a little more expensive, but provide the same level of connectivity and the same level of performance, but are also mobile. So those DSL guys had either better drop their price a lot or upgrade their networks a lot, right? So that's one of the pushes. Another push is transparency. If you let consumers see everything that's going on, it's they will that will force people to upgrade. Another thing is lowering the cost of rights-of-way. Very important, I think, actually, for the fiber optic community. I don't know that we're going to create new wireline facilities competition, but we should at least try to, where we can, do that, and also lower the cost of upgrades, and rights-of-way are a big part of that. But also, we want something pulling from above. We want someone to develop the applications from above. The Google project does that. Some things Cisco, AT&T, Verizon, others are doing does that. But I think that, you know, what we were looking at, we realized these military bases are really kind of mini communities. They all have healthcare facilities. They have schools, or there are schools very close by. They actually have fairly high levels of connectivity now. But if you extend that connectivity to the barracks and you really use that opportunity to see, you say to the private sector, we're going to have these communities with extraordinarily high levels of connectivity. If you have a good idea for an application, come talk to us, and we'll be able to test it out there. I think that can really help drive a lot of demand. It's so important from our perspective in terms of this national plan that people develop applications here, you know, because those are the things that can be exported around the world. It keeps the jobs here. We want those folks to be developing, you know, the devices and the applications for the American market. That's really important. I might also say that I think that there's something important, not just economically, but really for the country, that if a 4-year-old kid has their parent in Iraq, the technology is there for that 4-year-old to be able to talk to their parent with high definition video. We ought to do that. I mean, that is something which these people sacrifice a lot. Very attracted to the notion that the people who sacrifice so much for us ought to have the highest levels of connectivity anywhere in the world because of the sacrifices that they're making.
It did seem to, picking up on the applications a little bit, that did seem to be a kind of a theme. I know the chairman went out to Silicon Valley and talked to some of those folks, and of course the Google announcement was important. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had a very interesting proposal in terms of wiring community centers with with fiber, actually. And so there's been definite input. Cisco came out with just an enormous router this week, which we think was related to what's going on. So that certainly plays a role.
I think, by the way, it goes back to what you started by talking about. I think the plan, it's too early to know, but the early indications are the planning process and the coverage that the plan got in the week that it came out does put broadband at the center of a conversation about how do we as Americans think about the future, how do we solve the problems of the future. In that sense, I mean, that is one of the great hopes we had for this, that people would say, as we look at how do we address the problems we have in education or healthcare or energy, etc., broadband cannot solve any of these problems by itself, but it should be part of the solution to all these things. And I think that conversation that we've been having somewhat quietly for the last 6 months, and rather noisily for the last week, and we'll see how where it goes from here. That's a very important thing for the country, I think very valuable.
So maybe you're building a certain momentum in a sense.